Good evening. My name is Susan Waterman, and it is my honor to welcome you to the first candidate forum of 2022, hosted by the Windsor County Democratic Committee. This evening, we'll hear from the Democratic candidates for Lieutenant Governor in our great state of Vermont, Charlie Kimbell, Patricia Preston, Kitty Toll, and David Zuckerman. The questions to be asked this evening were submitted by residents of Windsor County. Thank you to each person who took the time to submit their questions. While we would love to be able to ask each and every one, for this evening's event, we have selected 5. These questions have not been supplied to the candidates or their staff ahead of time, so they will be hearing them along with you in real time. Facilitating this event along with me this evening is Dottie Deans, who will be keeping track of each speaker's time to ensure that each candidate's opportunity for communication remains equitable. Our moderator this evening is Robert Hager. Robert's career has spanned 35 years as an NBC television news correspondent, working out of bureaus, first in Vietnam, then in Berlin, Moscow, New York, and finally Washington, D.C. He was raised in Woodstock, Vermont, and his wife hails from Rutland. After his retirement, they returned to Woodstock, where they now live full-time. So without further ado, Robert Hager.
Susan, thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks very much for having me. Good evening to all our candidates. And thanks for your willingness to serve. Public service is surely a wonderful thing. Our style tonight will be very informal. It's a forum. It's not a debate. There are no gotcha questions, and I hope we can keep it real conversational. The order was done at random, and here is, honest to gosh, the cocktail shaker I used to draw coins out of, which cocktail shaker was not in use today because I'm the moderator. And anyway, to draw coins with the initials of our different candidates. So as it happens, it's David Zuckerman will lead off with his introductory remarks, followed by Patricia Preston, and then Kitty Toll, and then Charlie Kimbell, just to alert the candidates so they know what's coming. And that's for the opening statements. And then at the end, your closing remarks, we'll just reverse that same order. In between on the questions, I'll just try to mix it up. 2 minutes is our magic time standard tonight for both the opening statements and the closing statements, and for the answers to the questions as well. And the candidates have been told that Dottie Deans is our timekeeper. She's going to put a little notice in the chat box when there's 30 seconds left of that 2 minutes time. And then at the end of the 2 minutes, if need be, she'll jump in to say thank you or whatever. Anyway, we're going to try to keep this very informal. And to the candidates, don't feel like you got to use the 2 minutes. Nobody will think anything less of you if you wrap up early, if you've made your point. So don't feel like you gotta fill up the 2 minutes to sound erudite or wonderful. At any rate, let's having said that, I think these opening remarks, what I particularly had in mind was, since we're not doing a bio introduction, that you each tell a little biographical information about yourself. And I think there'll be plenty of time for positions in the questions and answers and in the wrap-up statements. So I think biographical material, so we can get to know you, is important in the opening statements. So let's call on in the random order that we decided. David Zuckerman first, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Hager, the Windsor County Democrats, and everyone else who's here tonight. My name is David Zuckerman, and I'm running to be your next Lieutenant Governor. I'm a farmer, a father, a business owner, and I've had the honor of serving you for 22 years as Lieutenant Governor and as a state legislator. I've been talking with Vermonters across the state. I've noticed a theme. People are exhausted. They were exhausted by COVID, inflation, war, climate crisis, and the breakdown of democracy. And now, just last week, they've been pummeled with the news that our Supreme Court is planning to overturn Roe versus Wade and take away a woman's right to an abortion, reproductive freedom, women's autonomy, their economic mobility, and more. People are exhausted by the housing crisis and the rapidly rising cost of living in Vermont. People are exhausted by the climate crisis and the lack of urgency from many political leaders. Folks are reaching a breaking point. We need experienced leadership in the Lieutenant Governor's office on day one to work with Vermonters to address these issues for our future. Whether it be Keith and Rutland, Mohammed and Winooski, throughout my entire career, I've organized alongside Vermonters to solve some of the most pressing issues that we face. I've organized with Vermonters to fight for raising the minimum wage, and I've alongside nurses when bargaining for workplace safety. I've worked in those marginalized communities that have been disproportionately harmed by our racist drug war. And I know we need to bring more people into the political process, because when people are empowered by our democracy, we can make bigger and bolder strides in improving their lives and creating a state where future generations will thrive. I've been meeting with people from around the state. Many have told me they wanted my voice, leadership, and organizing skills back in office in these difficult times. From living rooms in Brattleboro to the firehouse in Bennington, forests in Belvedere to the farmers market in Burlington. I've heard firsthand the struggles that people are facing. And as your next Lieutenant Governor, I look forward to hitting the ground running and building off of the work that we've already done together. Thank you.
Thanks very much, David. And for our next opening statement, let's go to Patricia Preston.
Thank you. And thank you to the Windsor County Democrats for hosting this forum, as well as all of you joining us virtually tonight. As Mr. Hager said, my name is Patricia Preston, and I'm a lifelong Vermonter. I was raised on a fourth-generation dairy farm in Randolph Center, where I learned a lot of values that make me who I am today and represent what kind of leader I will be in Montpelier. While on the campaign trail so far, I have been speaking with Vermonters from across the state who are sharing their stories with me about the challenges they are facing, which have only been exacerbated by COVID-19. From rising costs of gas and groceries to childcare and housing, we cannot wait to address these issues. As your next Lieutenant Governor, I will be an advocate for addressing the affordability crisis through supporting policies that make childcare and housing affordable, addressing climate action by supporting the expansion of renewable energy production, and strengthening our rural communities by expanding high-speed internet access. While there are clear obstacles before us, change is possible when all Vermonters are afforded a seat at the table. My work over the last decade as president at the Vermont Council on World Affairs is rooted in this principle, that we must engage in public forums and civil discourse to address our most pressing issues. For nearly a decade now, I've been bringing Vermonters together with leaders from the public and private sector to engage in civil discourse. And through this work, I've strengthened the cultural fabric of Vermont and worked to address climate change and expanded workforce development opportunities. We cannot wait to address the issues facing our state or expect that the same old way of doing things will deliver new results. I am part of the next generation stepping up to serve our state to create a more promising future for Vermont. I will do this by elevating the voices of Vermonters in every corner of the state, which is an extension of the work I've been developing for nearly a decade at the Vermont Council. It is now time for new leadership in Vermont to unify our state and deliver results that work for all Vermonters.
Thanks very much, Patricia. And now let's go to Kitty Toll. Oops, got a mute problem.
Shouldn't have done that. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be with all of you here tonight, and thank you to the Windsor County Democrat Committee for hosting this forum. And hello to Charlie and David and Patricia. It's good to see you. I am Kitty Toll, and I was born and raised in Danville on our 7th generation dairy farm. I'm the youngest of 14 children, which I'm sure was a challenge for my mother. However, hard work, community service, and caring for friends and neighbors were modeled by my parents every day. I attended all Vermont schools, graduating from our local high school in Danville. I attended Linden State College and completed a master's degree at the University of Vermont. I'm the mother of 2 daughters, and my husband and I have made our home here in the Northeast Kingdom. I taught middle school for 14 years, which was both very rewarding and challenging. And I served in the Vermont legislature for 12 years, 10 of which I was a member of the House Appropriations Committee and chaired that committee for the final 4 years. The work of this committee is to write the state budget, and in doing this work, I did not see people as Democrats, Republicans, independents, or progressives. I worked with everybody at the table to get the job done. All of these experiences have brought me to this forum tonight, and it's here tonight as a candidate for Lieutenant Governor that I want to reiterate that the country is at a crossroads and Vermont is at a crossroads. We have to decide which way Vermont is going to go. Thanks to our federal delegation and especially Senator Leahy, an unprecedented amount of federal dollars has come into this state. and we must spend these monies wisely to address the inequities in broadband coverage, cell service, housing shortages, and the lack of high-quality, affordable childcare, and climate change. The decisions we make today and over the months to come will shape the future of Vermont. Over the course of the evening, we'll be talking about these important issues that impact Vermonters.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kitty Toll. And last but not least, Charlie Kimbell.
Well, thank you, Bob. I'm talking to you from the State House where I am right now, and we're trying to work with our conferees on the Senate side to come to a compromise on a big economic development and workforce development bill. But my name is Charlie Kimbell, and I'm running for Vermont Lieutenant Governor. Tonight, I'm going to ask for your support, not just because I live in Windsor County, and I do, but because I am the best candidate for the position based on my work experience, community involvement, values, and political experience. For 35 years, I've worked in companies large and small. I've helped people buy their first car, a home, start and expand a business, helped artists make a living from their work, helped manufacturers thrive, and connected people to the outdoors through the products they buy as a retailer. In the community, I've been a coach, volunteer, and board leader. I am on the board of the Good Neighbor Health Clinic in White River Junction right now, and was the race director and board chair of the Covered Bridges Half Marathon for 15 years. I embrace Vermont's motto of freedom and unity, and believe in our political tradition of social justice, self-reliance, Yankee frugality, and environmental stewardship. I am a moderate Democrat, not taken to extremes, instead working to find practical and pragmatic solutions in which government can be an agent of positive change in people's lives. I am serving in my third term in the legislature, representing Woodstock, Reading, and Plymouth. We will be adjourning for the year this week, I certainly hope, after 2 years of navigating the pandemic and the pressures it has brought on every aspect of life. I'm the vice chair of the Committee of Commerce and Economic Development, and a leader of the Rural Caucus, focusing on legislation and policies that will help the smallest communities thrive. If elected Lieutenant Governor, I will focus on moving Vermont forward with investments in affordable and quality housing and childcare and paid family leave, as well as rural vitality and workforce development. I am asking for your vote, as well as your help and financial support to win the Democratic Party nomination in August. Thank you for your time. I look forward to the discussion tonight.
Thanks, Charlie Kimbell. Now we'll go to the questions. And as Susan Waterman said at the beginning, these questions are not mine. They were chosen by the Democratic Committee for Windsor County, but they're good questions. And the first one, kind of a softball, but anyway, good question about why you chose to run for lieutenant governor. And we're doing this by random, who goes first, but as it happens, I drew Patricia Preston's name first. But that's interesting because this is a first experience for you going into politics from your world with educational organization. What made you decide to do it, and what made you decide to go for lieutenant governor first?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. I'm running for lieutenant governor because I believe in the promise of Vermont. And as a lifelong Vermonter, I know firsthand when neighbors, communities, and Vermonters come together, we're able to find common ground and surmount any challenge. And I think that the growing divisions in our politics today have really stopped communities in some cases from coming together and finding necessary solutions. So as lieutenant governor, I plan to bring people together from every corner of the state, just as I've been doing at the Vermont Council on World Affairs, to address the state's most pressing issues. So in my current role as the president at the Vermont Council on World Affairs, I've spent the last decade traveling to every corner of this state, meeting with Vermonters, hearing what issues they're facing and also their successes. And it's largely similar conversations that I've been having on the campaign trail so far. And what I want to do now is really take the next step. And I look at it as an extension of the work I've been doing over the last 10 years and be able to support the Senate in passing policy that is impacting the Vermonters that I've been talking with over the last decade, and also elevate the voices of those Vermonters that I've been meeting with and make sure they're a part of the conversation and have a seat at the table. I also think it's really important that we have representation from the next generation of leaders stepping up and stepping in and being a part of these conversations. And I intend to, as lieutenant governor, address the affordability crisis, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, from rising gas prices to childcare to housing. I think that this is a critical thing to address as Lieutenant Governor. I also want to be a leader in renewable energy and help build a sustainable future for my children and my children's children, and strengthen our rural communities by expanding high-speed internet access and workforce development opportunities. So for these many reasons, I think it's time that someone like me stepped up, and I felt uniquely qualified.
Okay, thank you, Patricia. And I got Charlie Kimbell up next. So Charlie is interesting. He's been 5 years in the legislature. I think there was some talk about thought he would run for Speaker of the House a couple of years ago, but that didn't work out. And now deciding to go for Lieutenant Governor. So how did you come to that decision?
Yeah, thank you, Bob. I really enjoy the work that I do in the legislature now. I've been working on workforce development issues for the past 5 years, and my committee has passed some pretty comprehensive legislation, and a lot of the times it doesn't go forward. In terms of we pass the legislation, but then the programs don't get lifted or things fall through the cracks. And I'm really looking at the Office of Lieutenant Governor as a bigger platform to work on things such as workforce development, because there are a lot of different people that are in that space. There's educators, there's skill providers, there's individuals looking to gain a career, a meaningful career in Vermont. But oftentimes there's a lot of silos that exist within that atmosphere or that ecosphere, if you want. So I'm really looking at working at trying to bridge the gap between those different providers that are in the system, and do that as a major thing that I want to focus on as Lieutenant Governor. And the other thing is the timing is right. I'm 57 years old. I've got a grandchild, which is great. But now the kids are all gone. They're out of the house. I've got this wealth of experience in private business and politics and community involvement. And I really want to apply that and the skills that I've gained over that time period to the Office of Lieutenant Governor. So I look forward to doing that. I look forward to working with people from all over the state of Vermont. And so I think the time is now for me.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. And David Zuckerman is next up. Now here you got 18 years in the legislature, forever, and then 2 terms already as Lieutenant Governor before dropping out for a term to run for governor, unsuccessful race against Governor Scott, but now deciding to come back for more for Lieutenant Governor. Why?
Well, thank you, Robert. I really appreciate it. Why is because a number of people reached out to me from across the state and said they really missed the voice that I lent to the statewide office on the issues. They missed that there was a bold leader willing to stick his neck out and talk about the urgency of the issues facing us today, whether it's climate today, democracy today, affordable housing today, but also in the past, really speaking out, not about broadband now, while the money's here from the federal government, but being willing to say, we need to invest in our economy, invest in broadband for years. Reaching out and sticking my neck out around GMOs when nobody was ready to talk about them. Nobody even knew what it was. People wanted leadership on issues like cannabis that took 20 years, but I stuck my neck out. People recognized and wanted me to run, to bring this voice into the Lieutenant Governor's office again, as an organizer that would work with people all over the state to amplify their voices and to really bring that urgency into the State House, because there is progress being made, but it's really not at the pace it needs to be made, particularly around the climate, particularly around affordable housing, rebuilding our rural village centers to build localized economies, a food system that is much more resilient. There is not a central figure at the statewide level who has the experience of both being an organizer and a business owner, a farmer who's supplying food for people, and therefore they were reaching out and saying, please run. It's time for bold leadership. And that inspired me to run. And then again, my wife and daughter said, we need you there. I don't think they were trying to kick me out of the house. I think they wanted me there on those issues as well. Thank you.
Thanks, David. And finally to Kitty Toll. Now, you were 12 years in the legislature, then decided not to run. I'm not sure we know why, but all of a sudden then, a year out of office, now deciding to go for statewide office for Lieutenant Governor. So tell us about that.
Thank you, Robert. I appreciate the question. I did leave in 2020 after 12 years in the legislature. And I left for some new adventure, new opportunity. I didn't know what that would be and what I would find. But what I did find was a world that changed in a very short time period. And January 6th is what really was the turning point for me. I was watching with the former Speaker of the House, the new legislature coming in and swearing into office, the Speaker giving her new speech, and then the horrible images in Washington started to unfold on the news. And at that point, I had no idea what I was going to do in the future, but I knew our democracy was at stake. And we have certainly seen our democracy become very fragile and in a manner that I have never witnessed or could ever have witnessed. And I feel everybody has to do their part to save democracy. It's fragile. And public service is what I do, and it's what I enjoy. And having a strong voice for all of Vermont, to have a strong voice of those who are underserved is what I do best. And I feel the office of Lieutenant Governor is the office where I can come and talk and be the voice of those who have been left behind, who have not been heard, and for communities that have been left behind. Also, as chair of the Appropriations Committee, I saw these federal dollars continue to come in to this state in amounts that I could never have fathomed in all the time that I was in the legislature. And I want to be a voice as those dollars come back for reappropriation, because they will not all be spent, that I can be a strong voice for underserved areas in Vermont and to spread broadband and housing issues. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you, Kitty Toll. So that's question number one. Again, these questions come from the Windsor County Democratic Committee. So question number two is, what are the specific duties of Lieutenant Governor? So it makes sense to start with David Zuckerman here, since he's been there twice. So if you can start out by telling us what the Lieutenant Governor is supposed to do, and then the others can talk about, how they feel about those priorities, how they get them done.
Sure, thank you. There are three very prescribed roles for Lieutenant Governor. One is, of course, to be prepared to be the governor at any moment in time if the governor becomes unable to do the task of serving and leading the state. The second is to preside over the Senate, sort of like the town moderator for everybody who goes to town meetings, to make sure the process flows smoothly, to make sure the process is respected by all involved and that all voices feel like their perspective was heard. And the third job is the most bizarre title, which is to be a member of the Committee on Committees, a 3-member body with 2 senators and the Lieutenant Governor, to make all the appointments. Now, the reason I think I ought to be in that job again is we are in this tumultuous time. I'm well experienced in the role. We're going to see a lot of turnover both in the legislature, the Senate, and now it looks like many statewide offices. So having that prior experience is very valuable in returning and helping make sure that process all goes smoothly. I was also, as Lieutenant Governor, very connected to people all across the state. First, due to my work as a legislator, traveling the state, working on some of those issues I talked about before. But also, I got so many calls and emails from citizens across the state who said the governor's people weren't returning their calls. Their legislator sometimes wasn't returning their call. And I was one of the only people that would return their call and help them navigate state government. And one of the things you have with time in that office is to both help constituents. And what I also did was travel the state a lot to help bring the State House and the issues out to people all around the state and help them learn how to elevate their voice in the process. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And Kitty Toll, I have you next up. What's your reaction to these various duties of the Lieutenant Governor, and one more important than another to you, or whatever?
Thank you. David outlined the duties of the Lieutenant Governor very well, so I will not reiterate that. I do feel, as a former chair, and especially the chair of a committee like Appropriations, that I would be well suited to preside over the Senate. I understand parliamentary law. I understand how to run a committee, and I would bring that seriousness and dedication to the Senate. But to the office of Lieutenant Governor, I would like to open up that office for a different purpose. I left the legislature on very good terms with House and Senate members and with leadership. with the pro tem and with the Speaker of the House. I would like to use those relationships in the trust that I built over the 12 years that I was there to use the office for information finding, for fact finding, to bring in groups of people that the Speaker or the pro tem that are in conflict and maybe can't find a common way forward on important policy. I would like to use the office to find solutions to the legislative process on policies that may be getting stuck. I would offer that. Whether I was given that opportunity, I don't know, but I have the trust, I have the relationships, and I have the work experience with the two chambers. I would also like to be a very strong voice for all of Vermonters. Constituent services were key when I was a legislator. I answered my emails. I found answers to questions that constituents have, and I found solutions to their problems. And I would like to continue that work on a statewide level so that every corner of the state is well represented. And that's what I would use the office for. Thank you.
Thank you, Kitty Toll. And Charlie Kimbell, do you have thoughts about the duties of the Lieutenant Governor and how you feel about which ones are the most important ones?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. I often get asked, so would you have to quit your day job? And what's interesting about Office of Lieutenant Governor is many in the past have just kept their regular job, not during the legislative session, but off season. Howard Dean was, I think, working as a practicing physician when Dick Snelling died. So it's definitely can keep your day job. The second is, can you work with a governor? Do you like Phil Scott? That's a question I often get. It's like, yeah, Phil and I disagree on some key issues, but I'm a moderate Democrat, and I get along with him on most issues, not all issues, especially his veto pen. But the other is, just looking at, well, what would you do? And I think I've addressed this before, but I really look at using the office as an opportunity to convene stakeholders around key important issues. And for me, those key important issues are workforce development, rural vitality, and then those household issues such as affordable and quality housing and childcare. But one of the things I've been doing in the legislature is a leader of the Rural Caucus, which is a bipartisan and tripartisan group of House members focused on the needs of the smallest towns in Vermont. And we really look at issues that are affecting every town, no matter what political color they are, and trying to come up and influence legislation that can be for those industries that are most important in rural Vermont. And the key is to be able to work across the aisle and get those people working together. And I've been able to do that over the past years. And I enjoy that work. And I think I've been effective in it. We've been able to move a lot of legislation through this year as well in a rural omnibus bill, rural economic development omnibus bill. So I look forward to the work, and I won't have to quit my day job, which I really like.
Thanks, Charlie. And Patricia Preston, how do you feel about these different duties of the Lieutenant Governor?
Yeah, I really appreciate this question because I think, David really clearly outlined the roles and responsibilities of the office very clearly. And I think that it's often looked at as a part-time position. I look at this as a full-time position that I would fully immerse myself in and give my all to, just as I've done at the Vermont Council on World Affairs. I think outside of those very specific duties that again, David outlined, we really have possibility here, and we have the possibility within the role to make it what you want of it. One thing is that I think it's really vital that you work closely with the Senate and with the administration to pass policy. And I have experience directing and implementing federal funding quickly and effectively, and I'm going to bring that to the Office of Lieutenant Governor. So as Lieutenant Governor, I'll be ready to responsibly and effectively direct the federal funding and address the most pressing issues and build an economy in Vermont that really works for everybody. I also think that our democracy is in threat. And one way that we will save our democracy is through civil discourse. And as the Lieutenant Governor, I plan to bring my decade of experience at the Vermont Council on World Affairs and what I've seen is possible when we bring Vermonters together to engage in civil discourse to the role of Lieutenant Governor. Because by bringing Vermonters together to engage in these kind of conversations, we can make true change in Vermont. And I've done that by bringing leaders together from the public and private sector over the last decade. And I've strengthened Vermont's cultural fabric, and I've worked to address climate change and expand workforce development opportunities through building this sort of coalition across the state, which I will only further continue to do as Vermont's next lieutenant governor. So I'm really ready to bring my experience as a proven consensus builder to the office to build bridges across Vermont and deliver lasting results, from making healthcare and prescription drugs more affordable.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Patricia. And now we go to our third question, again from the County Democratic Committee. Given the many issues that the legislature needs to address, what are a few that you personally feel need attention? And I think the committee was especially interested in any issue that you feel is not at the forefront. There's something that just in your belly that is not at the center of attention right now that ought to get done. So for this, we'll call on Charlie Kimbell first.
Well, thanks, Bob. We're still not through with this particular session. And in any 2-year biennium, you've got over 1,000 bills that get introduced. They're not all different. A lot of them are the same. And so there are many, many issues. And right now we find ourselves with the climate bills that are coming through, the clean heat standard, which was vetoed by the governor. And so we'll be voting on whether or not to override that veto tomorrow. We just passed legislation to bring it to the voters on the constitutional amendment this year for Proposition 5, guaranteeing reproductive rights, and also one prohibiting slavery from the Vermont Constitution. So we've been very active in those things, and those both are coming to the voters to vote on in November. So if I look around all of the different things that we could possibly work on, my personal energy has been involved with workforce development. And so we are doing a lot of work there. There's still a lot of work to be done, and better coordinating the activities that are going on throughout the state for workforce development. And I like to think of it as career development more than just workforce. And the second is any issues always come back to housing, no matter what it is. If it's workforce, well, where are you gonna have them live? Are we gonna attract people here? Well, where are they gonna live? Is it affordable for people to be here? It's like, okay, what are their housing expenses? So we have allocated a lot of federal money over the past 2 years into different housing projects, and that will start to bear fruit. But the work is not finished, and is to work with those housing partners that we have throughout the state on those issues. Also affecting the personal lives of our Vermonters is looking at childcare, and looking at the affordable and quality childcare that is necessary for them to participate in the workforce, but also for them to provide an educational and nurturing environment for the kids.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. And next to Patricia Preston, a few issues that you feel are important, and particularly anything that may not be in the general realm of the daily news that you are particularly interested in.
Great. Thank you so much for this question. I mean, of course, I think that we need to be looking at climate action, building a green economy. We need to be looking at affordability, and that includes not just gas prices, but housing prices and childcare, and strengthening our rural communities and economies. And that means developing a workforce and high-speed internet everywhere. Those three things are incredibly important, but I'm going to focus on the part of your question that you said might not be getting enough attention. The future of reproductive freedom is under immediate threat, and nationally, as a nationally recognized vote pro-choice endorsed candidate, I'm proudly a part of the pro-choice majority of our country, and I will always fight for reproductive rights to ensure that Vermonters have the right to make their own decisions about their reproductive health. I strongly support Prop 5, and as Lieutenant Governor, I will work to ensure that all Vermonters have access to critical health services, whether that's about contraception, abortion, prenatal care, or childbirth. Despite abortion being legal in our state, it is not accessible to everyone, in particular our Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, our entire BIPOC community. We need to find a path to build a more just and equitable society, and we must ensure that reproductive health is accessible and affordable for all. Thank you so much.
Patricia Preston, thank you very much. And we'll go next to Kitty Toll, issues that are important and particularly anything that's more yours than the general issues.
Well, thank you. And I would say that the COVID pandemic has highlighted many important issues. And I don't want to shy away from the ones that I think are most important, because these are the ones that I feel we have to address in order to grow the Vermont economy. And it's broadband and cellular, housing and childcare. I look at it as a three-legged stool. You cannot do one without the other and grow Vermont's economy. In order to keep young Vermonters here, in order to keep businesses here, in order to attract new Vermonters and welcome them, I said welcome them into this state, and to welcome new businesses, we have to have broadband in every corner. And I know in rural areas like the Northeast Kingdom and rural areas across the entire state, there's no value in living in certain areas if you cannot connect to the outside world. And we saw these inequities with children in school when kids were home learning remotely during the pandemic and they didn't have equal access to broadband. It is not a fair, it's not a fair playing ground for these children. Many families had to sit outside of school libraries or outside shopping center parking lots where they could connect to public Wi-Fi. And if anything has shown us that we have now moved into a new world with remote learning, remote working, and remote alternatives. And I feel that expanding broadband, and you have to have housing, because you can have all the broadband, but if you don't have places for people to live, it doesn't work. And everybody deserves a home. And we also have childcare needs in order to support families. And so that is where my focus will be in order to build the Vermont economy. Thank you.
Kitty Toll, thank you very much. And David Zuckerman, what are the issues that you're feel most important about?
Well, I really appreciate this question. And along with highlighting what many of the other speakers have said around broadband, housing, childcare, and so many of these investments we need to make, it really comes down to money. And most folks are going to expect me to go to taxes, but what I'm going to go to actually is efficiency in government. A couple of years ago, I brought an idea to Governor Scott. I said we could work together to look at the two biggest parts of state government: human services and education, where we spend over $1 billion to $1.5 billion, almost $2 billion in each of those arenas. Those two silos do so many of the services for the same people, and yet they're completely isolated. We need to really roll up our sleeves, take the time that Lieutenant Governor has. While it's a part-time job, it's a full-time salary. And I happen to think when you're Lieutenant Governor, you ought to use that time to really dig into the things that aren't sexy sometimes. Look at those two agencies, break down the barriers between them, and save money by going in early and being preventative. Investing in kids early on to deal with mental health issues and support them so they can be the best thriving citizens they can be. Look at places where some families can't get access to human services because it's 20, 30, 40 miles away. Why not have offices in every school that every town has, so we can have better, more efficient services for our families so that they can get themselves up and into success better and save Vermont money so we have the money to invest in all of those other areas. They're critical, but we're not going to have the unlimited, almost unlimited federal money. Leahy is retiring. We got huge sums of money. Broadband is now on track. The money is there. We've been talking about it for a long time. So I think the legislature is talking about those issues, but no one's really looking at efficient government to free up money. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And now we go to question number 4. I didn't say it before, but the candidates have not seen these questions in advance, so they're winging it. In any event, I like this question. It's about the pandemic, which we've talked about some. But given the uptick in cases, there were 829 new cases since Friday, they said on a TV tonight for Vermont. So the question is, how do you think Governor Scott has handled this pandemic? Would you have done anything differently? What do you think now of masks or how to treat those who are deliberately unvaccinated? So let's start on this one with Kitty Toll, please.
Thank you for the question. This one's a little close to me these days. I contracted COVID last week, and I didn't have a case that certainly sent me to the hospital, but it sent me to bed for a couple of days with a sickness that I had not experienced. It felt like the worst cold and the worst flu combined that I had ever had. And I was very thankful for the antiviral drugs that I was able to get. I was also very thankful that I'd already had my vaccinations and I'd had my booster. I am kicking myself that I had not had my second booster shot yet. And whether that would have made a difference, I'm enough months out that my Moderna shot probably was wearing off. And I didn't plan it before my daughter's graduation from college, and I paid the price. But COVID, you don't know how it's going to hit or who it's going to hit. I traveled with 10 family members, all exposed to the same people, the same airplane ride, the same graduation, and I'm the only one that contracted it. But I certainly did. I think the governor has done a very good job with COVID. I did not support town by towns determining later on if they would have a mask mandate. I think that pitted one town against the other, especially neighboring towns, and that was not a direction that I would have gone. I choose to wear my mask. I wear it now, so I'm not exposing other people, but also to protect myself. And even with that mask, I did contract COVID. I certainly support vaccines. I think we want no misinformation about vaccines. I support the boosters, and it's a very different, it's very different with vaccines. I've heard, on Facebook, you read terrible things about, if you want to leave my body alone with what we're reading in the news, why would you make me get a vaccine? It's because what I have can impact you, and what you have can impact me. And so I am a strong supporter of vaccines and the boosters.
Thank you.
I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks, Kitty Toll. Let's go to David Zuckerman next. How do you think Governor Scott did during the pandemic, and what's your view going forward about masks, vaccine mandates, et cetera?
Well, thank you, Robert. I appreciate that. First and foremost, I'd like to say that I think for the most part, the governor did a very good job. I spoke to that while I was campaigning against him. I complimented him. And I think that reflects how Vermonters felt about COVID in general. When we were scared, when we were unsure of the future, he was a stable, steady speaker and had a good team around him. At one point, I even said I would keep his team on were I to win the governorship because they were well experienced and so forth. On the other hand, I also want to remind people that at that point, another candidate and myself, Rebecca Holcomb, pushed hard for an earlier mask mandate. He was very, very slow in doing a mask mandate that many people forget. He also did really well because we had, again, way more money per capita than most every other state. So we had more shot clinics, more testing facilities, and more resources to keep our business afloat. And he did that very well. On the other hand, right now, we have 12 out of our 14 counties are in the high levels, as stated by the CDC, which in their opinion ought to trigger people wearing masks in those dense communities, whether it's schools, which I know is really hard on our kids. But we've had 4 different schools closed because of high levels of COVID transmission right now. We have Vermonters over the age of 70 nearly at the same rate of hospitalization as at the peak of the pandemic. So right now, the information flow from the administration is not clear and transparent. And we have more Paxlovid, I think it's called. I'm sure Kitty knows exactly what that is. And we need to make sure that's more accessible and the distribution system is more available so that more people get it early. Thank you.
David, I think I got to ask you, I remember a couple of years ago when you were running for governor, the issue came up about being skeptical about vaccines. I think in the meantime that you've pinned that down pretty well. But I think it's nice for people to hear it in your own voice. How do you feel about it now?
You want me to speak to that?
Yes.
Well, that was a greatly distorted situation. Even when I spoke on the floor back in 2015, I said the science behind vaccines is perfectly sound. I'm very pleased at the quality of the vaccine and the uptake of the vaccine by Vermonters. And I agree with one of the other speakers with respect to the fact that Vermonters got vaccines and wore masks despite the pushback at the federal level by some of the people that were really voicing skepticism. And we did much better for it. Vermonters looked out for each other, took care of each other. And the reasons to do this are both for ourselves and our community and our family members around us. So,
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Patricia Preston, how do you think Governor Scott did, and how do you feel now about masks and vaccine mandates?
Great. Thank you so much. I think that, I think about my opening remarks when you asked this question. And I just think about how I've been traveling the state and talking to so many people about all of the issues that they're facing, from affordable childcare to housing to broadband, and how directly related to COVID these issues are, and that each of these issues were infinitely exacerbated by COVID-19. If I think about childcare, women were disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. If we think about broadband and getting high-speed internet to rural communities, it is a human rights issue when COVID-19 hits and folks have to go isolate in their homes and they don't have access not just to family members for chatting, but they also don't have access to internet for work or for healthcare, which is a human rights issue. So for me, the COVID-19 crisis made it really clear that we need to protect our most vulnerable and strengthen our communities and build an economy that truly works for everyone. And as it relates to Governor Scott, I think that he did a really good job of making sure that we had access to education and awareness. And he held press conferences that relied heavily on science and brought Dr. Levine in to help Vermonters feel connected to the information early on in the pandemic, which I think was vital to the success of Vermont doing so well and being a leader in how we were addressing the situation. Thank you.
Patricia Preston, thank you very much. And Charlie Kimbell, how do you feel about how Governor Scott handled this? And what do you think now about masks and vaccine mandates and so forth?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. So it was March 2020. I remember serving the legislature, and we had to get some legislation together quick so that we could go to adjourn and take provisions to make sure that Vermonters were going to be cared for. The executive orders were issued by the governor and forcing businesses to close. The folks in the Department of Economic Development were in charge of actually advising those businesses as to could they stay open or not. And they're generally in the business of trying to get them to be open and get more people to come in. So they were put in that unfortunate position and necessary one to say, no, you can't be open as a business. Are you essential? Are you necessary? So I think the governor made some really hard choices early on about how to keep Vermonters safe. Also, if you remember, standing up the emergency facility at the Champlain Valley Exposition Fairgrounds. And the National Guard was building all the potential beds that might be necessary based on what we didn't know. They didn't really get used to the degree that they were anticipated or maybe just planning for it. But so the governor, I think, has done a good job on that. I would agree that it would be a lot more efficacious if there was a uniformity in the mask policies. We often complained about the national government and how it was being left up to the states, when what we really needed was a nationwide policy. Well, then you can't do that on a town-by-town policy inside of the state of Vermont. It should be more uniform. So those are some of the thoughts. I mean, we really have to recognize the impact on schools. I had one teacher tell me this weekend that the kids really that she's dealing with, and we're talking about kindergarten, they're feral. Like, oh, so they've been really out of sorts for a couple of years, and being able to get into a normal system where they're getting pre-K, they're getting kindergarten. And so it's been really tough on the kids and also on the educators in the school system. And that's been the hardest part. And I know this is an incredibly sensitive issue. So thank you for the question.
Thank you, Charlie. Now we go to question 5, last round of questions. And this again is from the campaign, from the Democratic Committee here in Windsor County. Any campaign is full of promises, but delivering is a whole other issue. So how do you see a path to implementing what you dare to promise? So let's start with Patricia Preston, please.
Great. Thank you so much. I agree. I think the campaigns are full of promises, but I also think that Vermont is full of promise. I think that we have a lot of potential and promise in this state that we have to live up to. And as the Vermont Council on World Affairs president, I have a history of taking an organization that was struggling and increasing revenue by 130%, directing federal funding, and doing this through bringing people together, unifying voices and lifting up voices that aren't heard to at least find common ground in an effort for progress. I've had the opportunity in my role to work with legislators and with our congressional delegation and administration in different capacities. I've built relationships with many of them and I'm looking forward to working with them and helping the Senate as they are passing legislation. I think that what is really vital is civil discourse. And I think that civil discourse is what will save our democracy and what will help me deliver on the promises that I'm talking about. And that's what my work is rooted in, is bringing people together. Folks, our organization is an apolitical organization. So I'm used to bringing together Republicans and Democrats and libertarians and progressives to find common ground on really complex issues. And I look forward to having the platform as Lieutenant Governor to do the same thing on the statewide level to impact policy. Thank you so much.
Patricia Preston, thank you very much. Let's go to David Zuckerman. There are lots of promises, but how do you see a path to implementing these promises?
Well, as Lieutenant Governor, I've got the experience of being there, knowing what those limitations are. And while there's been a lot of promises, as you stated, of working with the legislature to get a lot of things done, many legislators don't want the Lieutenant Governor butting in too much in the day-to-day decision making. So for me, the experience of working with Vermonters across the state to elevate their voices, help them learn how to make their voices louder in the process, I've done that and I've been successful at it in the past and plan to do more of that. But additionally, I just want to go through my track record for a moment, and you can find out more at my website, zuckermanforvermont.com, where you can see that I helped lead the way on raising the minimum wage, passing cannabis reform, GMO legislation, Lyme and tick-borne illness, marriage equality, a number of environmental bills, some of which I was recognized as an environmental leader for, as well as being recognized as a leader by Vermont Businesses for Social Responsibility. And I've done a lot of work on expanding our diversified ag sector over the years and really expanding the strength of our rural economy. And so a track record speaks for itself. And I want to bring that track record of working with people. When you look at those bills, they were passed with most of the time with very diverse legislative bodies, not just Democrats or progressives, but Republicans and independents as well. And I've heard from people all over the state that one of the things they appreciate is that I welcome everybody into that office. There is no sense of feeling of party tribalism in the Lieutenant Governor's office, because honestly, it's a statewide position. We represent everybody, and we have to make sure that everybody is included. And I have a track record of doing that. Thank you.
Thanks, David Zuckerman. Now to Charlie Kimbell. So promises, but how do you find a path to implementing what you promise?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Always a good question in politics. So, I mean, if I look at the things that I want to focus on, really looking at continuing their development and our investment in housing, looking at workforce development, looking at childcare, the affordability and quality of childcare. There's a lot of different things we could focus on. For me, my passion is in workforce development. And for the last 5 years, I've been working with the people that are involved with those processes throughout the state, whether it's the Community College of Vermont, Vermont State Colleges, different regional development corporations, different groups. So I think I've got the relationships that are necessary to really leverage what I already have established with those groups and continue it on. Also, on the issue of rural vitality, as a member of the Rural Caucus, we've been having discussions with people about what is about Act 250 reform that's necessary to create more housing in our village centers and our downtowns. How can we make that happen and make it easier? So we've been having those discussions for a long time. We've tried to pass through a lot of legislation that would make that easier. We might have a chance with some legislation that's currently bubbling through, but it really comes down to having those relationships, working with the people and continuing to elevate that conversation so that we can get through to the things that really matter to Vermonters. So thank you.
Thank you, Charlie Kimbell. And now to Kitty Toll, how to implement all the promises that are made.
Well, the promises I'm making is to have a strong voice for broadband, childcare, housing, and the environment. And I have deep, extensive knowledge doing the state budget. I had to balance the state budget And it was important to me when I was doing that work that I understood the policies behind the money, that I work closely with the departments and agencies across the state, and that I work closely with the entire Appropriations Committee. It was critical for me that everybody around, around the appropriations table was working as a team, and that you shed your party label when you walk through the door. Every one of my budgets in the 4 years that I was chair left the committee on a unanimous vote, and the budget went to the floor and passed on near unanimous votes, which was highly unusual and not seen in quite some time. I have a reputation of working together to bring parties together, to bring people together, and to find a common path forward. And I have developed the respect, and I have the experience, and I have a deep reputation for hard work and getting the job done. I understand how the budget works. I know the funding streams. I know how the money works, how it's matched, what you can use it for, what you can't use it for, where we've underfunded for years, and programs that we've made huge strides in, like weatherization. And so when I made the decision to run for lieutenant governor, I recognized that there was a possibility that I might be called on to be governor, like it happened with Howard Dean in the case of the death of Richard Snelling. And it was not a quick or casual decision for me, but I had the confidence because I know I have the experience and the qualifications to assume the role if anything were to happen. And I can draw upon my experiences with the state budget because it's like a master's course in state government. And I would look there first in order to move these promises forward from my past history. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kitty Toll, thank you very much. So that completes our answers to the questions. I thank the candidates for all those erudite answers. And now we come to the closing remarks. And as I explained before, we'll go in the reverse order of the opening remarks. So that means that Charlie Kimbell leads off with closing thoughts.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you to the Windsor Democratic Party. And as being a member of the party, remember, I don't want to assume that I'm going to get your support, but I hope you feel like I'm the best candidate for the job. You know, I have lived in Windsor County for approximately 26 years since moving back with my kids. But I didn't always live in Windsor County. I grew up in St. Albans. And when I was entering freshman year of high school, I went to Woodstock Union High School. My family moved to Brownsville. I met my wife in chemistry class, oddly enough, and all three of my kids all graduated from Woodstock High School. So I think I know the county pretty well, but I also know the state pretty well. After working for 35 years in companies large and small, and working in village and local government, regional government, and community organizations, organizing events for nonprofit organizations, I think I've really worked hard to help benefit my community members and continue to do so in the legislature. I want to bring that experience to the role of lieutenant governor, where I think that there's an opportunity to really cast a vision beyond just the legislation in front of us, but really where we want to be as a state going forward. I look forward to that opportunity. I would love to have your vote and your shoe leather and a donation, but please go to charlieforvermont.com. So it's Charlie Kimbell, and the reason why I don't have my last name on there, so Charlie Kimbell, nobody can spell Kimball, right, Bob? I mean, most people, when they spell Charlie Kimbell, they get a race car driver online. So that's why it's charlieforvermont.com, and I want to thank you for that. And I look forward to seeing you on the campaign trail.
Thank you, Charlie. Let's see, I'm not kidding. Something's happened with the picture there, the video. I wonder.
I don't know.
Well, I think we can go ahead anyhow. Maybe, yeah, something's in front of the camera there, I think.
No, I don't. There's
Now it's cleared up.
Is it? I can see
Whatever it was, it's
don't
cleared
know.
up now. So anyway, sorry to hear you had the COVID, and we hope it's very, very mild and a quick recovery. And thanks for hanging in there with us tonight and appearing. But your closing remarks, please.
Thank you. As I stated earlier tonight, Vermont is at a crossroads, and the paths we choose and the actions that we take are definitely going to define our future. I also know this federal money is not going to last forever, and it's up to all of us to make the decisions and the choices for the Vermont we want to see in the future. From my time chairing the House Appropriations Committee, I've gained extensive experience developing, managing, balancing budgets. I understand how the state budget works, and I know how critical investments can improve the lives of Vermonters. For Vermonters to thrive, we need to make investments, and I keep going back to broadband, cell service, childcare, and the environment. We must invest in housing to keep Vermonters in the state and to attract new Vermonters here. And we must make critical investments to protect our environment and to protect climate and climate change and preserve our way of life, not to protect climate change, to move away. However, we have to come together as Vermonters. The political divide has no place in this state, and democracy itself is on trial, and we can't let it fail. Vermont is unique. We have a history of leading. The challenges are sobering, but I really believe the opportunities are limitless if we check our partisan hats at the door. And together we can make a Vermont that we're all proud of. The choices we make today will be a statement of our values. And as your Lieutenant Governor, I will bring thoughtful leadership, a strong work ethic, and Vermont values when tackling our state's challenges. I know what Vermonters want to see. They want to see their leaders do what they do, working together. And thank you for having me tonight. And if you would like to learn more about me, please go to Kitty Toll for Vermont, kittytollforvt.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Kitty Toll. Now let's go for closing statement to Patricia Preston.
Thank you. Vermont is at a critical juncture, and we must take action now to make lasting progress. Right now, we need leadership in Montpelier that not only takes action, but is looking to the future to ensure all generations can grow and thrive in our state. For nearly a decade, I have served as the president and CEO of the Vermont Council on World Affairs. In that role, I helped turn around a struggling organization and grow our annual revenue by more than 130%. Today, my organization is stronger than ever before and has created millions of dollars in economic impact for our state. As a nonprofit leader of a nonpartisan organization, I am in a unique position to not only solve our state's biggest challenges, but also deliver results that incorporate all of the voices of Vermonters. I am running for Lieutenant Governor because I believe in the promise of Vermont. I am a part of the next generation stepping up to build a better future for all Vermonters. I'm not your typical politician, and I am not looking to the past for solutions. As Lieutenant Governor, I will pursue new, innovative solutions for the challenges we face. On day one as Lieutenant Governor, I will bring new energy to Montpelier and move Vermont forward on what unites us. I will do this by listening and by bringing people together across the state to find common ground and deliver solutions. By working together, we will move Vermont forward to build a green economy through leading in renewable energy and jobs. We will support our working families by making childcare and housing more affordable. And we will strengthen our rural communities by delivering high-speed internet access for our state. We can create a more promising future when we work together. I believe that building trust and cooperation among Vermonters throughout the state is what we need to solve our greatest challenges and deliver results for Vermont. If we take bold actions, we can build an economy that creates opportunities for all Vermonters. If we engage in civil discourse, we will find there is more that unites us than divides us. And if we believe in leadership that is equipped for the future, we will fulfill the promise of Vermont. Patricia for Vermont.org. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patricia Preston. And for our final closing remarks of the evening, David Zuckerman.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for attending. I have a very proven track record of being effective, both as your Lieutenant Governor and as a state senator and representative. I've always been working for the future. I fought hard to raise the minimum wage and for marriage equality, GMO labeling and cannabis reform, healthcare improvements, and local agriculture bills that have fueled the last couple decades of growth in our diversified agricultural sector. I'm running to fight for my daughter and your children and grandchildren as we're at this critical juncture. When I served as Lieutenant Governor, my door was always open. I've welcomed everyday people into my office, not just the well-connected. I held weekly open door coffee hours during the session to help people find their legislators and navigate tricky conversations. People valued that work, and I've heard from many who want me to continue in this role. I met daily with groups who came into my office to share their ideas with me and to ask how they could be more effective advocates for themselves and their neighbors. I started regular blue-green meetings to bring labor and environmental groups together to make progress that would benefit the environment and working people. This past year, I've received many calls and emails from a wide range of people asking me for more information about what's happening or to help them with their needs, even in this year off. I've continued to do my best to get them answers and empower them to fight for the change that they want to see. We must increase people's access to the halls of power to make the change that we so desperately need. I remember a time when an older visually impaired woman was moved to tears when I handed her my business card that had Braille on it. When abductee leaders were at the State House to celebrate the first Indigenous Peoples Day, I made my office their space to collect their thoughts and I'll help them prepare. I would like to get your vote to return to the office of Lieutenant Governor and hit the ground running as an experienced voice in that office. I'd appreciate your support. Please visit my website at zuckerman.com for more information, or to help, or to inquire, or to donate. Thank you again.
Thank you, David Zuckerman, and thanks to all the candidates for participating tonight in this very informative debate. That concludes our program. I guess it all comes to a head on August 9th, or in the pre-voting or after voting for August 9th, when the primary is held, and then the general election to follow. Thanks too to Windsor County Democratic Chairman Susan Waterman for organizing this debate, and Dottie Deans for keeping the time and helping to organize. And thanks to all our viewers for tuning in on YouTube. So watch for additional forums that county Democrats are planning them for the Senate seat and the congressional seat. Watch for all those coming up, and have a good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
I wanted to announce next week, May 16th, we're going to hear from the candidates for the Windsor County Sheriff. And then after that, on May 23rd, we'll have a forum for the candidates for the U.S. House of Representatives. So definitely tune in for that. And remind everybody too that if you have any feedback for tonight, let us know. We appreciate you joining us. And also, please consider following the link in the description to donate to the Windsor County Democratic Committee. Your donation will help us to ensure that Democrats and those who will uphold, defend, and ensure our values and rights are elected up and down the ballot in November. So thanks a lot. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.